So this class is also live streaming, as you, but you're not on camera. So
Every Friday it's live streamed?
yes, yeah. I live stream my Wednesday class as well, but that's at a different studio, and I have other classes that are not drop in that are also live streamed. Okay, welcome. This is August 13th. This is a level 1 to 3 90-minute class. And the theme is letting go of neck tension. Come to a comfortable seat and maybe experiment with sitting on a block or a cushion and notice whether that has an effect on the amount of neck tension you have. Because it probably does. As you sit on something lower, your hips tend to roll back. The tops of the hips roll back farther, which rounds your back more. And the more your back is rounded, the more you tense the back of the neck. So your head is still, you're still looking horizontally. And so if sitting on something higher helps you reduce neck tension, then that's probably a useful thing. Now, you may want to roll your hip crest forward a little bit more to see if that creates even more length in the back of the neck. And you want that length to be soft. So if you sort of put your fingertips into the back of the neck just below the skull, if you're lengthening the back of the neck by pulling your chin down, those tissues will harden, and that's not the way to do it. It's not effective. So you want a sort of soft hollowness in the back of the neck. If you tilt the chin up, notice that your fingers get pushed out of that space as well, because the skull is kind of pressing down on them. So that also prevents that space. So we're looking for that soft space that can fit 2 or 3 fingers. Close your eyes, tune into your breath. Notice where your breath goes. As you inhale, allow the crown of the head to float up a little bit more. And I intentionally use passive voice here, allowing the head to float up rather than floating the head up. Because if you can figure out a way to do that or to allow that to happen with less effort, it's going to result in less neck tension and more space. With your next inhale, breastbone floats up, collarbones broaden, arms rotate out. Then breathe into your back ribs sideways to float your arms all the way up. Notice that if you reach up through your fingertips and or look up at the ceiling, that creates neck tension. And then notice that it is possible to lift the arms without that neck tension. Let the inner margins of the shoulder blade kind of relax down the back. Don't pull your shoulder blades forcefully down the back. That's actually more problematic than pulling them up. And then exhale your hands to your heart. Let's begin with one Om. Take a slow, delicious inhale. Inhale, expand. Exhale, bow. Lower your hands to your thighs. Relax the back of the neck. Inhale, float your head back up. And come to standing. Without using your hands, if you can, find a wall or actually a post in this particular room. The posts are much better. You can even use a corner post. They actually have advantages. Stand in front of the wall in a way that feels neutral. And then walk backwards, tiny little steps, see what touches the wall first. And it's usually the buttocks. And if your glutes are big, you actually probably want to, let me do it over here, want to use the corner of a post or room, because really we don't want to measure where the buttocks are, we want to measure where the sacrum is in space. And if you're alignment is neutral. Your sacrum and your upper spine and your head will all touch the wall at the same time. It's not true, though, for most people. For most people, the head is forward. Once the sacrum and the upper back are touching, the head probably isn't touching. If it is not, just measure how much space there is. And notice that just kind of pulling the head back to the wall creates tension. It's not the solution to the problem. Here's the solution, though. Maybe watch me for a moment. So my butt stays at the wall. I'm going to tilt the head back to get it to the wall. This is the setup. It's not the solution. And I'm going to tilt it back even farther to push the shoulder blades away from the wall. And then I'm going to wait a couple breaths. I'm going to let these muscles fatigue so that they can relax more easily in a moment. And then on an inhale, I'm going to roll my shoulder blades down the back, and I'm going to allow the crown of the head to float up the wall. And that engages the right muscles to help relax the back of the neck, because we're actually using the antagonists to these muscles, which means we're triggering a reflex that helps relax them. Do that a couple more times. So tilt the head back so far that your shoulders come off the wall, but keep your butt at the wall. Notice that the neck tension doesn't feel particularly good. It's stressing you out, quite literally. On an inhale, bring the shoulder blades gently down the back as you allow the back of the head to float up the wall. And then you can check with your fingertips to make sure that the back of the neck, the upper back of the neck, is actually soft. You're not pulling your chin down. I know there's lots of instructions about pulling your chin in to get your head back on top of your spine. They don't really work. Okay, now, so remember how many fingers of space you had between your head and the wall. And then we actually need, 2 blocks. So I'm going to just grab some extra blocks. One more. Pass them on. And one for you. Set them up in an L shape like this. Yeah. So in this particular group of people, actually, did everybody's head touch at the same time as the back? It looked pretty close. Not quite? Okay. Well, so if your head does not touch at the same time, that means you have head forward position. If your head is forward of your spine, you can't avoid neck tension. You need that neck tension to hold your head up. So getting the head back on top of the spine is really an integral part of learning to let go of neck tension. And this is the best way I know to get your head back on top of your spine. Release down onto the block so that the edge of the lower block is right by the bottom tips of your shoulder blades. And then bring the head down onto the higher block. And again, check your neck. And if your neck is back bending, if you feel like your head is falling backwards, then lift the back of the head with your fingertips off the block, just a millimeter or two, and guide the back of the head away from the shoulder blades so the back of the neck lengthens. And notice how that increases the stretch in the front of the chest. And then again, check with your fingers that the back of the neck is long but soft. It's not being pulled so long that those tissues are hardening. That's no longer a good thing because it's too much of a good thing. And then palms facing up. Breathe into the front of the chest if you want to deepen the stretch more. Right? If you've been carrying your head forward of your spine for a long time, which most people do, this only applies to about 99% of humans, so it might not apply to you. The tissues in the front of your chest and in the front of the spine have gotten tight over time, because that's what tissues do. Connective tissue, if it's always slack, actually remodels itself to be tighter, shorter. So stretching out what has gotten tight is an integral part of this. And then another part is learning to relax what is always contracted, and that's the back of the neck. Now, if your head doesn't touch the wall, normally when you walk backwards towards the wall, I suggest that you do this maybe once a day for 2 to 5 minutes. And if it's severe, maybe do twice a day. And you will see a pretty dramatic change within a few weeks or a couple of months. And if it's really severe, you might actually need a bigger difference in height between the blocks. So you could put the lower block on its lowest setting, or you could put a cushion on the higher block. When you're ready to come out, don't sit straight up because you're just going to retighten probably what you just stretched out. Roll down to one side, and you can come out now. And then press your hands into the floor to come back up to sitting. And then don't use your hands to come up to standing. Come back to the wall. And again, stand in a way that feels neutral. Walk backwards. And notice whether your head is now closer to the wall than it was before. Now, once your shoulders are touching, how much space is there? So if there's a difference, and there usually is, right, you have sort of reset, at least temporarily, what feels neutral. And if you do this often enough, you will reset it pretty much permanently. Okay, come back to your mat and come to table. Spread your fingers. Exhale. Draw your head into your turtle shell. Didn't know you had one, did you? Sliding the shoulders up towards the ears, right? That's how you move. That's how you create neck tension. And then on the inhale, extend forward to the back corner of the crown of the head as you roll your shoulder blades down the back, getting nice and long in the neck. Exhale. Create the neck tension. Notice how that feels. Inhale. Let it go. One more time. And this is really, essentially, the same movement we just practiced at the wall. Yeah? And so the challenge for today is, can you keep doing this movement, like basically moving the back of the head and the shoulder blades away from each other in more and more challenging poses? Okay, return to table. Inhale your right leg up behind you, and then your left arm out in front. And can you do that without looking forward? And then optionally bend the right knee, hold on to the outer ankle, press the ankle into the hand, take yourself into a gentle back bend. Letting the head float up last. And release. We are predisposed to move from the periphery. And that means a lot of neck tension, right? Whenever you sort of, for example, lifting the arm up, right? If you look where the arm is going, you're going to create neck tension. And that's completely unnecessary here. Inhale the left leg up to horizontal. And then the right arm, and again, learn to disrupt that unhelpful pattern of wanting to look at your fingertips. It's really not important. You know where they are, even without looking at them. And then bend your knee optionally, hold onto the ankle, press the ankle into the hand, hug the knee into the midline, Susie. So if you're letting the knee drift out to the side, which is the easiest thing to do, you're avoiding stretching the outer quad, which is usually the tightest. And release. Walk your knees back 15, 20, 25 centimeters. Curl your toes under, lift your knees off the floor for downward dog. Play around with your shoulder alignment. Notice that sending the hips as far back as you possibly can get them means your shoulders are sliding off the back towards the ears. Lift to the armpits, roll the outer armpits towards the floor. Notice how that hugs your shoulder blades onto the back and lengthens the back of the neck. That's actually a really useful thing to be doing here. Inhale forward to plank. Make sure you have enough room for plank. If not, slide your feet back a little bit more. Hug the shoulder blades onto the back, extending slightly out to the crown of the head. Bring your knees down for your first chaturanga. Bend your elbows straight back, and instead of thinking about going down, think about going forward. Extending forward through the crown of your head, and then landing not on your chin, but on your forehead. If you land on your chin, you've already created neck tension in a pose that's actually a neutral spine pose, right? Chaturanga is not a back bend. Relax the forehead down. Interlace your hands behind your back. Exhale, tone your lower belly. Inhale, float your breastbone up and away from your belly button. Exhale down, forehead down, hands to the floor. Inhale, cobra. Begin by rolling the shoulder blades down the back, which floats the breastbone away from the belly button. Let the head float up last. Learning to move from the inside out helps you reduce neck tension, right? Because the neck is the last thing to engage here. Exhale, downward dog. And so you can see how much back bending you can do everywhere else, and then you can decide how little or how much you want to add in the neck. And I would suggest you don't look up in Cobra, even if someone taught you that way. Because again, it's just reinforcing a pattern we're already too good at. Looking up equals neck tension. Let's do this one more time, and if you want to try it without bringing the knees down first, feel free. But if that causes you to land on your chin to create too much neck tension, then I would suggest you do it with the knees down first. Inhale forward to plank. Exhale, send your heels back. Hug the shoulder blades onto the back. Take a nice inhale, lengthen, and then exhale. Extend forward. Land on your forward. Just come into Cobra this time. But locust is, again, if you have an overly rounded upper back, locust is a fantastic pose for strengthening the upper and middle back muscles that can pull you out of that over-rounding. That's the third part of this equation I hadn't mentioned. I said, stretch out what has gotten tight, learn to relax what is always contracted. The third part is strengthen what has gotten weak. Okay, from downward dog, sorry if I didn't tell you to come out of Cobra. From downward dog, inhale your right leg up behind you, lift your inner thigh. Exhale the foot forward. Bring your right hand inside the right foot. You can rotate the right knee out a little bit, and then lower to your edge. And maybe you're already there, and that's fine. But notice that the lower you go, you can put your elbows on a block or put your elbows on the floor. That's a form of reaching with your arms. It pulls the shoulder blades up towards the ears. It rounds the back and tenses the back of the neck. So can you let go of that neck tension? Can you roll the shoulder blades down the back? Can you soften and lengthen the back of the neck? And when you do, notice how that dials up the head stretch. And that's actually a big reason for excessive neck tension. If our hips are tight in particular, we're all really good at avoiding stretching our hips. And the way we do that is by distorting the shape of the spine, and that distortion ripples all the way up into the neck. Last exhale. Inhale, come up onto your hands. Exhale, step forward. Relax the back of the neck all the way here. Inhale, float up. From the inside out, arms float up last. No need to look up. Right? If you're in the habit of looking up and of reaching your fingertips up in Hasta Tadasana, see what it feels like when you don't. What would happen if you let go of this idea that you have to reach as high as you possibly can? Okay, here's another chance. Inhale, breastbone floats up, collarbones broaden, arms rotate out. Back ribs expand sideways. Notice how that movement floats your arms up without neck tension. Exhale, forward bend, relax the back of your neck. Inhale, halfway up. Floating your breastbone forward. Pause here for a couple breaths and notice how much neck tension there is and whether that actually makes sense. And the lower you place your hands, so if you've been taught to put your hands on the floor here, yeah, okay, but does that cause you to tense the back of the neck? Because you're, again, pulling your shoulder blades off the back. So can you choose a different variation where you give up where your ego gives up on this idea that the fingertips must be on the floor, and explore if you can let go of the neck tension if you stop reaching. And notice how much better that feels. And it's not easier, it's actually harder, right? Because you've got to tilt your tailbone up behind you. But notice how much better it feels when you let go of that neck tension. And notice that it is actually possible. Last inhale here, exhale, right leg steps back. Left hand inside the left foot, and again, lower to your edge. Again, notice how reaching farther creates more neck tension, but not necessarily. You can, if you start developing this awareness, probably get rid of some of that neck tension, let go of it, even with your elbows, on a block or on the floor. But it doesn't mean that you can no longer completely avoid the hip stretch. Last exhale, inhale back onto your hands, step the left leg back to plank, and then chaturanga, knees down first. If that helps you, chaturanga without neck tension. And the other part, and then inhale cobra. If you want to do chaturanga without neck tension, you have to start thinking of it as a nice adjustment. Susie, shoulder blades rolling onto the back, away from the ears, right? Exhale, downward dog. Let me complete that sentence. If you find you can't let go of the neck tension in chaturanga, even with the knees on the floor, then you're probably not extending far enough forward. You're trying to fit your spine into a space that's actually too short for it, which means you have to exaggerate the curves, and that means exaggerating the neck tension. Inhale your left leg up behind you, lift your inner thigh, exhale the foot forward. Inhale your hands to your heart. Exhale, tone your lower belly. Inhale, lengthen. Front of the chest lengthens, back of the neck lengthens, and then exhale, twist. Elbow to the outside of the knee. And notice that whenever we twist, we tend to add a forward bend. If the front of the chest is collapsing, that often also results in neck tension. So float the breastbone away from the belly button. Float the back of the head away from the shoulder blades. Free your breath. Let go of the neck tension. You can try a more challenging variation if you like. Put the right hand on the floor or on a block. But if you're then stuck in the neck tension, maybe you're actually better off in Anjali Mudra variation here. Last exhale. Inhale back to center. Balance on the inhale. Exhale, step forward. Relax the back of the neck all the way. Inhale, float up on the breath, moving from the inside out. Floating the arms up at the end there without neck tension. Exhale, swim home. Keep going. Moving from the inside out, moving from the breath. Exhale, forward bend, relax the back of the neck. Inhale, halfway up, floating up on the breath. Lengthening along the front of the chest and the back of the neck. Exhale, left leg steps back. High lunge, hands to your heart. Exhale, twist. And notice that freeing the breath generally also reduces neck tension, right? Because generally when our breath is compromised, it's because we're collapsing the front of the chest. That means the thoracic spine is too rounded. When you stop rounding the thoracic spine quite so much, you can then also stop overarching the neck. Again, you can try placing the hand on the floor. But if you're then stuck in neck tension, please notice that and maybe choose not to go there. Last exhale, inhale back to center, balance on the inhale, exhale, plank. Or straight to downward dog. You can skip some of the vinyasas. Chaturanga forward, land on your forehead. Inhale, roll the shoulder blades down the back to initiate the movement into cobra so that your shoulder blades end up on the back. Nice. Exhale. Downward dog. Inhale forward to plank. Exhale, send your heels back. Inhale, side plank on the right. Another pose where a collapsing of the front of the chest and too much tension in the back of the neck tend to go hand in hand. So undo that by rolling the shoulder blades down the back and floating the back of the head away from the shoulder blades. Exhale, center plank. Inhale, side plank on the left. And yes, you can do these on your elbow if side plank feels uncomfortable in your wrist. Free your breath. Soften the back of the neck. Again, you can check with your fingertips to make sure the back of the neck is soft. Exhale, center plank and downward dog, or another optional but spacious and delicious vinyasa. And downward dog. We'll change things up a little bit. We'll focus on hip stretches a little bit because the tighter your hips, again, tight hips
contributes to neck tension. Inhale your right leg up behind you, lift your inner thigh, keep the hips level. Exhale the right heel to the outside of the right hand, off the mat, onto the wood floor. You come onto your fingertips, and then let the heel slide into a sort of splits variation. And if this is collapsing the front of the chest and you're tensing the back of the neck, because that actually helps you collapse the front of the chest, maybe put a block under your hands. Doesn't make the pose significantly easier. It just makes it easier not to suffer through that neck tension and through that compromised breath. To make things a little bit easier, you could slide the foot more out to the side instead of sort of hugging the midline more. You can bend that knee. Breastbone floats up, back the neck lengthens. And bring the hands back down to the floor. Curl your left toes under. Inhale the right leg back up behind you. Three-legged down dog. And then exhale the right heel, same heel, to the outside of the left hand, across. And come into that splits variation. And again, notice the neck tension. And again, you can reduce the stretch intensity somewhat by bringing the leg more out to the side rather than right along the edge of the mat. Right? You can also bend the front knee a little bit. Not so much that you avoid the stretch entirely, but to make the stretch reasonable. And then again, open the front of the chest, lengthen the back of the neck. And bring the palms back down, curl the left toes under, inhale the right leg back up behind you, and flow through a vinyasa. You can do a three-legged vinyasa, but only if you can do it without neck tension. Right? Because that's, so don't land on your chin. Right? And I know this is very different from what you've been taught, probably, and that, right, that makes it hard. Like, but I've always done it this way. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's biomechanically good. Nice. Very nice. Yeah? And does that, it's better for your shoulders, which we talked about last week. But it's also better because you're learning how to manage your stress response. And you're not sort of feeling, you learn that you can actually decide when you want to invoke it and when you don't. And just learning a new pattern is a powerful thing for neuroplasticity. Yeah. Okay. Second side, back to downward dog. Wrap the outer armpits towards the floor, hugging the shoulder blades onto the back and relaxing the back of the neck. Inhale the left leg up behind you, lift your inner thigh. Exhale the foot forward to the outside of the left hand and let it slide, which is why it's on the wood floor, not the mat. And then, again, notice how you're desperately trying to keep the hip stretch manageable, and the easiest way to do it is to collapse the front of the chest and tense the back of the neck, right? And then undo that neck tension. Free your breath at the same time. It's a buy one, get one free. Savor each breath. Send energy out to the back corner of the crown of the head. Release the hands down, right toes under. Float the left back up behind you. Exhale the left heel, same heel outside the right hand. Stretching the outer hamstring. So on the outside, two on the inside. By stretching them separately, we can stretch them perhaps more effectively. And again, stretching is only part of this. The other part is learning to undo the neck tension, freeing your breath, making your practice smarter than your habits. Yeah? Noticing patterns of movement and posture that are not serving you, and then learning how to undo them. Palms down, curl the right toes under, inhale the left leg up behind you. Three-legged chaturanga. If you really want to challenge your ability to Let go of the neck tension. Nice. And cobra and downward dog. Inhale your right leg up behind you, lift your inner thigh. Exhale the foot forward. Bring the right hand inside the right foot, turn the left foot out. And start bringing the right arm underneath the right leg. And eventually, you can interlace your hands behind your back, maybe, or maybe not. If that's not accessible, don't worry. Just keep bringing the arm underneath the leg. And hooking the fingers isn't the point anyway. The point is to let go of the neck tension. But hooking the fingers behind your back is much easier when you round the upper back. And when you round the upper back, you tend to tense the back of the neck too. So can you undo that? Can you lengthen the front of the torso and lengthen the back of the neck? And you can use a strap if you can't hook the fingers. And then you can step the left foot forward, 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. Step it right behind the right heel. I like to keep it perpendicular, and then inhale, float up into bird of paradise. And then can you pause before you straighten that right knee? And can you let go of the neck tension, right? Because, again, whenever your chest is collapsing, you tense the back of the neck so that you're still looking horizontal. So undo the hyperkyphosis, the over-rounding in the upper back, and lengthen the back of the neck. And maybe choose not to straighten the right knee. And then release the foot back down, right where it started. Step the left foot back, 3 steps. Release the hands to the floor. Straight to downward dog or vinyasa. Your choice. Skipping some of the vinyasas is an obvious way to fine-tune your practice if you need to make it a little bit less strenuous. Downward dog. Come forward to plank, because some of your downward dogs look a bit short. If you don't have enough room for a spacious plank, make room by sliding your feet farther back, and then come back to a downward dog without stepping your feet forward. Does that result in a more spacious downward dog? Is it a harder downward dog? But is it more spacious? Second side, inhale your left leg up behind you, lift your inner thigh. Exhale the foot forward. Bring the left hand inside the left foot. And so if this binding thing here just doesn't work for you at this moment in time, you can also return to working on bringing the elbows lower and reducing neck tension there. This is just another step sort of farther in that direction. Turn the right foot out, bring the left arm underneath the left thigh. Maybe hook fingers. And if you are in the habit of grabbing your wrist here, which is sort of the classical way to do it, if you can undo the neck tension while holding onto your wrist, fine. But if you can't, then notice that if you just hook fingertips, you probably have more capacity to undo that neck tension. And that's just as valuable, maybe even more so, than grabbing your wrist here. And then step the right foot forward if you like. 3 steps. Inhale, float up. Nice and slow. And again, notice that your ego wants to straighten that left leg right away. Don't. Instead, free your breath and let go of the neck tension. Yeah. And even if you can't get rid of the rounding of the back entirely, you can still let go of the neck tension just by looking at the floor instead of trying to look at the horizon. And then release the foot down. Step the right foot back, 3 steps. Release the hands to the floor, optional vinyasa. Extending forward through the crown of the head, landing on your forehead. Floating up into cobra from the inside out. Exhale, downward dog. Okay. Put a block near the front of your mat, so it's ready if you want to use it. Come back to downward dog. Inhale your right leg up behind you, lift your inner thigh. Exhale the foot forward for warrior two. Turn the left foot out. Inhale up, hands to your hips first. Right. Again, that's just a technique to help you move from the inside out. Right? You're not sort of bringing the fingertips up as the first thing you do. So that you can focus on creating more neutral hip alignment, and then float your arms out and up. And if you use your neck muscles to lift your arm, turn your palms up from the shoulder blades. Roll the shoulder blades down the back to turn the palms up, and then turn the palms back down from the fingertips. And notice that you can hold up your arms without neck tension. And then if you've overdone this back bend in the upper back, then inhale into your back ribs, expand them sideways. And notice how that supports your arms even more. No neck tension required. And then transition to half moon if you like. Left hand to the left hip, block over on the right front corner of your mat. Wait for the exhale to finish, lift that back heel, and then float forward slowly. See if you can do that without momentum, without hopping. Energize the lifted leg, and then lengthen the front of the chest and the back of the neck. Free your breath and let go of the neck tension. And that's easier if you're using a block. If you're reaching, if you have to reach your hand all the way to the floor, and especially if you have long legs, then you may not be able to let go of the neck tension. And then bend the knee if you like for an optional back bend. But again, moving from the inside out, hugging the knee to the midline, extending the foot back behind you, not up above you. And yes, that's harder in terms of balance. And then release the foot, look at the floor. We're going to come back to Trikonasana. Exhale, bend the right knee. Inhale, float the left leg back. Not to warrior two, but to Trikonasana. And then exhale, vinyasa. Or straight to downward dog. Standing forward into your chaturanga. Nice. Downward dog. And then you can put the block in front of the left front corner of your mat. Inhale the left leg up, lifting through the inner thigh. Exhale the foot forward. Center line of the mat. Warrior two. Inhale up. Hands to your hips first. Bend the front knee. Notice how creating more neutral hip alignment will free your breath. And notice that neutral hip alignment isn't the path of least resistance, because more neutral hip alignment will also increase the hip stretches. And then float your arms out and up again. If you notice that you use your neck muscles for this, they're really not the right muscles for it. Turn your palms up from the shoulder blades. Roll the shoulder blades down the back. Turn the palms down from the fingertips, and then if you're overdoing the back bend, gently inflate your back ribs sideways with your inhale. Notice how well supported your arms are in this position here without any need for neck tension. And then transition to half moon if you like. Right hand to the right hip, left hand to the block. Lift the back heel, wait for the exhale to finish. Inhale forward as slowly as you can, because it's actually harder and it builds more strength. And then, hand on the block, maybe even just fingertips. Energize the lifted leg, lengthen the front of the torso. Right? You can use a lower block, but nobody's legs are that short that a full-length block is going to take you too high. Yeah? And I say that because I have really short legs. And then bend your knee if you like, and come into the back bend variation. But notice if the knee is being pulled up towards the ceiling, because that's easier. Hug it into the midline, which means down to the floor. If you fall with a smile. Extending the foot back behind you means your hips have to float in the opposite direction, otherwise you fall over. And then release the foot, gaze at the floor, exhale, bend the left knee, inhale, float back to Trikonasana. Floating up on the breath, back the neck nice and long. Exhale, optional vinyasa.
Make your practice smarter than your habits. Yeah.
Notice when you look up at the ceiling in Cobra and ask yourself if that's beneficial, if it's necessary, and see if you can disrupt that pattern so that you can compare it to something else. Relax in downward dog for a moment or come down to child. By the way, if you have been hearing me say spread your wings or breathe sideways into the back ribs and you don't know what I'm talking about, come down to child with your thighs touching. And then take a deep inhale. And notice that you can't really breathe into the front body here, so you will have to breathe into the back body. You can probably feel your back ribs expand. And if you're expanding them sort of up towards the ceiling, then they will also round your spine. But notice that you can expand them sideways. That will expand your side ribs sideways as well. And then it doesn't change the shape of the spine, and you can still breathe in your back body. And this is a powerful thing to learn how to do, because more than half your lung volume is actually in the back body, and most of us ignore it. Then you can bring your knees wide, come back down to child, and see if you can still breathe into the back body, even though now you could get away with just breathing into the front body. And a really nice thing to do here is to inhale first, to initiate your inhale in the front body, but to finish each inhale in the back body, taking advantage of your entire lung volume, front and back. But if you find that with the knees wide, you lose the ability to breathe into the back body, then keep practicing child with the thighs touching until breathing into the back body becomes easy. Okay, back to downward dog. One more standing sequence. Inhale your right leg up behind you, lift your inner thigh. Keep your hips level, exhale the right foot towards the right hand for warrior one. So a little bit of space between the feet, side to side. Turn the left toes out. Inhale up, hands to your hips. Again, exhale, tone your lower belly. And then inhale, you can sort of bring your arms up and look up the way you probably have been taught or the way you do it. And notice the neck tension. And then bend your elbows and bring your hands behind your head. Interlace your fingers. And then your elbows will probably go wide, which pulls the shoulder blades up more. So bring the elbows in so that your forearms are touching the side of your head. And then inhale, traction the back of the head up and away from the hips. Notice how that lengthens the front of the chest and the back of the neck and rolls the shoulder blades down the back. Notice if you can breathe better in this shape, in this alignment. And if you can, then you've discovered one of the detriments to excessive neck tension. It compromises your breath. And then just on an inhale, straighten the elbows to float the arms up without reaching, creating a different kind of warrior one. More energy flowing out through the crown of the head. And then transition to warrior three, if you like. Belly down on the front thigh, lift the back heel, wait for your exhale to finish, and come forward slowly, just harder. And then lengthen the front of the chest and the back of the neck. Warrior three, another really popular pose in which to create excessive neck tension. And then if you want, place your left hand on the block, inside the right foot, let the right arm dangle, inhale the right shoulder, elbow, wrist, fingertips up into a revolved half moon. And again, if you're sort of sticking your fingertips back behind you, notice that jams up the back of the shoulder and probably also creates neck tension. Roll the shoulder blade back, lengthen the back of the neck, and then yes, optionally you can bend the knee and hold onto the ankle and add the back bend. And release. Back to warrior three. Take a breath there, then exhale, bend the right knee, inhale, float the left leg to the left and back for warrior one. Exhale, put the block out of the way before you chaturanga, so you have room to go forward. And notice yourself kind of falling back into the rut of the autopilot in your vinyasas because you've done so many in your life. So keep turning the autopilot off whenever it turns itself back on. Inhale the left leg up behind you. Exhale the foot forward. Warrior one. Turn the right foot out. Inhale up. Hands to your hips first. Good. Bend the front knee. Tone the lower belly. Inhale. Roll the right hip forward because it helps for your breath. And then on the next inhale, come up into the pose. Again, notice if your default involves reaching and looking up. Then bend the elbows. Bring the hands behind the head. Maybe cross your fingers the opposite way. And then bring the elbows in. Hug the sides of the forehead. Traction the back of the head away from the shoulder blades, using your hands as guides. Notice the effect on your breath. Notice the effect on your neck tension. Notice the effect on your state of mind. Are you enjoying yourself more when you create less neck tension? And float the hands up just by straightening the elbows, keeping the shoulders in the middle of their range of motion. Neither jamming them down the back nor letting them float up towards the ears. Last inhale, exhale, warrior three. Belly down on the thigh. Wait for the exhale to finish. Inhale, float forward. Free your breath. Soften, lengthen the back of the neck. And stay here. Energize the lifted leg, or bring the right hand to the block inside the left foot. Let the left arm dangle, and then float up from the inside out into revolved half moon. Optionally, very optionally, bend the knee at the back bend. Hug the knee to the midline. Keep the back of the neck nice and soft. Release. Back to warrior three. Exhale, bend the left knee. Inhale, float the right leg back and to the right. Float up into warrior one. Without neck tension, move the block out of the way. Optional vinyasa. Nice. I saw that adjustment in Cobra there. And then come down to child. Thighs touching if you're still practicing breathing into the back body. And I actually didn't mention it explicitly yet today, but spreading your wings, breathing sideways into the back ribs is another way to trigger a relaxation in the back of the neck. If you want the explanation, whether you want it or not, I'll give it to you. Because that sideways expansion of the back ribs also rotates the bottom tips of the shoulder blades away from the midline, which means the inner margins of the shoulder blades have to descend. And that means those muscles that pull the inner margins of the shoulder blades up towards the ears or the skull have to relax. And those are called the levator scapulae muscles. And they're one of the primary neck tension muscles. So spreading your wings and tensing the back of the neck are somewhat incompatible with each other. Okay. From here, walk your hands back, lift your hips forward, curl your toes under, come into squat. And squat is yet another pose in which it seems expedient to round the upper back because that helps you minimize the hip stretches. And when you round the upper back, you tend to also collapse the back of the neck because actually tensing the back of the neck helps you collapse the front of the chest. And that is so because there's a reflex involved. When you engage one muscle group, it sends a relaxation reflex to the opposing muscles. And the muscles that take the upper back out of a rounded shape are the opposing muscles to the muscles that tense the back of the neck. So as you float your breastbone away from the belly button, you engage those back muscles, and that then sends the relaxation reflex
to the back of the neck. And as you open the front of the chest, notice how the back of the neck relaxes too and gets longer. Doesn't that feel nice? And then can you do the same thing in crow? Can you do crow without neck tension? And you can skip crow. You don't have to do crow. You can roll down onto your back and roll around on your back, or you can stay in squat. Spread your fingers. Keep your elbows bent. That requires much less strength than in crow, and that means your ability to let go of the neck tension will go way up. And then extend your heart forward, lengthen through the back corner of the crown of the head, soften the back of the neck. And optionally, release the crown of the head to the floor. And the reason I love that is that you have to then let go of the neck tension, otherwise this doesn't work, right? And then you can float back up. Now, this is also a great technique for dealing with the fear of crow, which is the fear of falling forward onto your face, right? Because if you can prove to yourself that you can go forward too far, and if you just let go of the neck tension, you'll just fall very gently onto the crown of the head. But you have to let go of the neck tension, so not the forehead. If you land on your forehead, then there was too much neck tension, right? Again, the reason this is so hard is because you're so good at doing the opposite. But well-being is a function of balancing opposites, of being able to choose between two options, choosing the one that is currently appropriate. And then, so if you want to come up into headstand from here, that's of course sort of the, like once you can land on the crown of your head from crow, then you can make that transition, which is kind of fun. Assuming that tripod headstand is already in your repertoire. The floor here is really uneven. It just caused my head to kind of rotate too far because there's a hollow in the floor, but that's actually lengthening the back of my neck. It's actually kind of nice. And then I'm back down. And then to lift the head off the floor, lift your breastbone forward. Lengthen the back of the neck. See if you can come up without falling directly onto your feet, which again means, yeah. So you are a little far on your forehead there, right? And that means that probably isn't really, so the best way to stand on your head is with your neck in neutral and your head directly underneath you. But if you have hyperkyphosis head forward position, that won't actually be possible because your head isn't where it needs to be. And so the reasonable adjustment is to tilt the head back, and so you're standing more on your forehead. But that's an indication that you have too much hyperkyphosis. And it's worth working on that because standing on your head with a neck that's arched too much is more problematic for the neck, right? You can't carry your weight as efficiently in the bones of your neck that way. So you're more prone to tweaking your neck. Yeah, so just something worth noticing, like which part of my head am I? And you don't have an option really. Like you can't just sort of, if you naturally have to stand here, you can't just choose to stand here because then your head will be in the wrong place. So again, draping yourself over blocks though regularly will solve that problem. Questions? No. Okay. Let's come to the wall. We'll play around with headstand a little bit more. Actually, no, let's play around with handstand and or forearm balance. Because in headstand, your neck position is kind of chosen for you. Depends on your posture. But in handstand and forearm balance, you have the ability to choose your neck position. And most of us choose full-on neck tension. And yeah, you can just unplug. This post is fine, and this wall is actually fine too. Just remind me to plug that back in. Although actually we should have enough juice for. And so have you noticed that if you look at photos of people doing handstand, most people are looking where? At the floor. And that means 90 degrees of extension in the neck. That means neck tension, right? Why do we do that? Right, there's two related reasons, right? It actually is easier to balance if you look at the floor because you're getting more feedback about where you are in space as you see the floor move. You also are afraid that you're going to fall on the floor, so you want to look at what you're afraid of. And because for most people handstand is a little bit stressful, right? Tensing the back of the neck is what we do when we encounter stressful situations because it triggers our stress response, and that's how we tend to deal with stressful situations, even when it's not actually the optimal response. So, if you're comfortable kicking up into handstand, feel free to do that. But then, again, the challenge for today is, can you relax the back of the neck? And since you're at a wall and you don't have to balance, you really don't need to look at the floor, right? So, and if you want instructions on, so if you don't kick up yet, let me actually show the other one first. Measure a leg distance to the wall. Turn around, place your hands where the standing foot was. Curl your toes under, lift your knees, step one foot up the wall, step the other foot up, just to hip height. Relax the back of the neck. And then if you want to make it harder, start straightening the legs more and more. But can you keep lengthening the back of the neck? And then maybe breathe into the back ribs too. And when you're ready to come out, come down all the way to child. Don't skip child. Okay, that's step one. So go ahead and do one of those, and then I'll give you other options. And again, right, we tend to think, oh, handstand is about getting up, and then once that's easy, then we think, oh, handstand is about balancing. But can you make handstand about disrupting neck tension? It's a great place to practice disrupting neck tension. And by the way, the lower position for the feet is, legs more or less horizontal. If you want to add an element of strength building here, you don't have to, but it's an option. Once you've relaxed the back of the neck, you can step the feet higher, and then you can step your hands in. Either just one step or walking all the way in and touching your nose to the wall and then walking back out and then coming down and resting in child.
And yeah, that's the best wall for this. So and you can all three fit there if you all three want to be on that wall. Yeah, I think you're fine. Okay, and then any questions so far? No. All right. Next option would be either kicking up, or if you're here in the room, I can help you. I can assist you up. Let me show you kicking up first. The most common way to do this is to swing one leg, but that's, again, biomechanically not the most effective way. By the way, if you have a hard time with that, try it in forearm balance. You require much less momentum to kick up in forearm balance than you do in handstand. So I'm actually going to demo this in forearm balance. Nice long dolphin to start out with. And instead of just swinging one leg, you step one foot forward, which creates a momentum involving your whole body, moving in the direction you actually want to move. So you step one foot forward, then you swing the other leg up without pausing in between. 1, 2. It looks really easy because it actually is really easy. And then can you let go of the neck tension? And then draw the lower front ribs in, breathe into the back ribs, make space for your breath, and then maybe press the hands into the floor. And see if you can balance even without looking at the floor. And then bring one leg down and come down to child. Okay, well, that's why you don't come up right away, because you might get dizzy. Okay, if anyone wants an assist, let me know, and I'll come over. So the assist is just, I put my hand under your shin after you lift your leg, and you press the shin down. So if you've got somebody else at home, would you mind doing this on camera?
I don't mind.
Okay, thank you. So that's okay. We'll be moving really slow, and I'll make sure to aim your foot at,
Yeah, I know, but right, this narrow space here is like, okay, that increases the stress factor, right? Okay, so come down onto your elbows. So if you've got another human in the house of about size, don't use your 4-year-old kid for this, they can bring you up. So first, decide which leg you want to lift up. And for this, actually, you want to step forward a little bit more. You want a slightly shorter stance. And then decide which leg feels more natural to lift up. That one. Okay, so I'll step. So you won't be stepping forward for this one. Just lift the right, which is why I had you come forward a little bit more to start with. So just lift the right leg up whenever you're ready and straighten it. And then press it back down to the floor. Like try to get the leg back to the floor, except I'm in your way, which means you're pressing yourself up and, sorry, yep, there. And there you are. And then flex the toes, push up through the big toe mounds. And then if your assistant is still with you, make sure they're not standing in front of you. Stand over to the side. And then draw the lower front ribs in. Bring the tailbone up towards the ceiling. And nice neck relaxation there. Beautiful. And when you're ready to come out, all you need to do is stick one leg into the middle of the room, and everything else will follow, and then come down to child. Anyone else want an assist? Yeah. And notice that letting go of the neck tension adds a whole nother dimension of challenge to this, right? It's not making it easier, but it might make it more enjoyable. Right? Notice those patterns of joy and tension and how they're incompatible to some degree. And then if you want another challenge, you can come up into splits in forearm balance or handstand, your choice, at the wall. But that means you have to be farther away from the wall, which is, it sort of increases, again, the trepidation factor. You need about a leg distance, or slightly less. If your hips are tight, less than a leg distance. If your hips are really open, maybe even a little bit more. So for me, it's, and then where your standing foot was is where your hands go, or your elbows, if you're doing forearm balance. I'm going to do this in handstand. Here, so we're going to create as little momentum as possible. So we're actually going to step up close and lift one leg. So the deeper you can go into splits, the easier this will be. And again, if it's really hard, it's much easier with the elbows on the floor. So come into standing splits, and then again, you're going to rock your whole body forward and backwards. And that way you can create slow momentum because you're using a lot of mass. And the breath pattern for now is inhale forward, inhale the hips forward, exhale them back. Exhale back, inhale forward. And eureka, there's the post. And then, so notice to come up, I am looking at the floor. I am tensing the back of the neck, but once I'm up, again, notice that you can let go of the neck tension. Press the floor away from you. Connect the shoulder blades onto the back, and maybe try balancing a little bit without looking at the floor, and notice that that's hard. It is, but it feels better. Like, yes, it's harder, but it feels better. And if you do, if you want to Google handstand, do a Google image search afterwards, notice how many people tense the back of the neck when they're like balancing in handstand. It's fine, but then you see a couple of people who don't, and notice how good that looks. And it looks good because you can feel, you can sense that it feels good. Nice. And then when you're done with the hard inversions, you can, don't worry. So I didn't see you, but one thing that tends to cause a rather hard landing is that you bring both legs down together, because that feels safer somehow, but it accelerates you much faster. Whereas if you bring one leg down, you get a soft landing, and then one leg is absolutely sufficient. Yeah. Again, it's like there's a huge Psychological component to this, right? And that's part of the reason why this is such a powerful practice. You're learning how not to get stressed out when stressful things are happening. And relaxing the back of the neck helps disrupt the stress response. And that's part of why it's such a powerful thing to learn. Yeah? Anyone else want another assist? Or when you're done, lie on your back, bring your legs up the wall. And you can fine-tune the intensity of that hamstring stretch by how close you bring your sit bones to the wall. And if you're not getting a stretch at all, then I apologize. No, they're actually, then all you need to do is tilt your tailbone down into the floor, and you'll be able to generate a stretch. You just won't be able to relax and get a stretch. You actually have to do a little bit of work. Or you could put a block between your calves and the wall, and then you can bring your butt in closer, and you can actually then relax while your hips are flexed more than 90 degrees. Oops. There go the Christmas lights. Oh well. Savor each breath. And yeah, if you want to add another component to this, you can bring your arms overhead along the floor next to your ears. And when you do that, notice how your back ribs come off the floor, your lower back ribs. Because of tightness in the shoulders, that arching in the upper back allows you to minimize the lat stretch. But then here you can practice breathing into the back ribs, which again is another way to reduce neck tension. Savor each breath. And when you're ready to come out, bend your knees, bring your feet down, roll over onto one side, and come back up to sitting. And you can either face the wall or face away from it for a seated forward bend. Facing a wall is interesting because it gives you something to aim for. Right? The tendency in seated forward bends is to replicate hyperkyphosis head forward position. Right? Especially in the straight leg variations where you're actually trying to reach your foot with your hands, because in order to make your arms longer, all you have to do is tense the back of the neck, right? Whereas if you keep the back of the neck long and keep the shoulder blades in neutral, your arms cannot extend as far. Nonetheless, it's better for many reasons. But the same pattern exists in Baddha Konasana. So if you want to do Baddha Konasana, feel free, or you can do Janu Shirshasana on both sides. This is a forward bend, clearly. So why do most people do a back bend in their neck here? Play around with it. So inhale, roll the hip crest forward, lengthen the front of the torso and lengthen the back of the neck. Float the back corner of the crown of the head up, like as if there was a little string attached and somebody was gently pulling on it, or even better, imagine a helium balloon inside your head and the head just wanting to float up. And then exhale, stay long as you surrender forward and lengthen the back of the neck. The reason it's so tempting to stick the chin out is that immediately collapses the front of the chest, creates a nice hunchback, nice in quotation marks, which drops your chin closer to the floor, which makes you feel like you're getting farther. But all you're practicing is really poor posture. Is that really what this pose is about? I would say no. So instead, roll the hip, as you inhale, roll the hip crest forward, float the breastbone away from the belly button, float the back of the head and the shoulder blades away from each other. Make space where there's a lack, make your practice smarter than your habits. And then on the exhale, surrender forward without collapsing. And so if you're facing the wall, you can think about extending the back corner of the crown of the head, to the wall. And if you actually reach the wall, so I don't know your name. The back of the neck is looking really nice and long. That's great. Yeah? But there's still a significant rounding back there, which you don't need to encourage. Gravity and time will do that for you. It's not something we need to practice. Yeah? So rolling the hip crest forward will help you engage the muscles that will also reduce the rounding in the upper back and will make it unnecessary. That's good. That's nice. Savor each breath. So if you're doing Janu Shirshasana, go ahead and switch sides. And if you're in Baddha Konasana, come out anytime that you're ready to come out. Walk your hands back. Use your hands to lift your knees, extend your legs out in front, press the fingertips into the floor. Allow the crown of the head to float up. Again, notice that lifting the breastbone, allowing the breastbone to float up. The only way that happens is through a gentle engagement of your middle back muscles. They also take your shoulder blades down the back, and that helps lengthen and relax the back of the neck. And then take your hands off the floor, exhale, engage your abs, roll down onto your back, either into a normal, regular Shavasana, or if you have two blocks, arrange them in an L and give yourself another almost 15 minutes of hyperkyphosis opposing relaxation. Right? Again, this is really powerful. If you don't have two blocks, you can actually roll up a blanket or a yoga mat, if you have a second yoga mat, into a roll that's about 10 to 15 centimeters in diameter, 4 to 6 inches. Put that on your mat. So I'm going to demo this other version here. The setup is quite different, but the effect is pretty much the same. The bottom halves of your shoulder blades go on the roll so that the top halves of the shoulder blades are falling off the roll, and the tops of the shoulders don't quite touch the floor. Arms out to the sides, legs straight or Baddha Konasana, your choice. And then if you feel like your head is falling back in either of these variations, you're actively avoiding the opening. You're doing the back bend in the neck instead of the upper back. So just lift the back of the head off the floor just a millimeter, and then traction the back of the head away from the shoulder blades. Again, not so forcefully that the back of the neck hardens. You still want it to be soft, long and soft. And notice how you now get a much deeper stretch in the front of the chest. Palms facing up, arms out to the sides. Relax into the pose. I'm going to just come around and check the positioning of the blocks. One temptation is to put the edge of the block too low. Susie, yours looks a little bit low on your back, the one under your back. Play around with the positioning and see if you can get a deeper opening. Whichever placement feels like it gives you a deeper stretch across the front of the chest is going to be more useful. Yours looks a little bit high on the back. I'd bring that down a little bit. And then I highly recommend putting the head on a higher support unless it feels like it's really pushing your head forward. And for some people, let's...
I don't feel the stretch here this way.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it's like...
Yeah, so and there isn't one perfect place for it either, right? There's a range that's useful, but notice the tendency to place it either too low, which means you're just back bending in the lower back, which you already know how to do, right? Or you're putting it too high, which again, you want the fulcrum, the edge of the block, somewhere on your upper back. So that looks a little bit low as well. The block a little bit too low on your back. Slide it up towards it. But so again, there's a range of useful positions, but there is such a thing as putting the block too high on your back, and there is such a thing as putting it too low on your back. Play around with it. Notice how changing the position actually changes the feeling. And your neck actually looks okay there. So I think for some people, having the head on the same height as the back is fine, or maybe same height of the block plus a folded up towel or something. Right? Yeah, that looks fine. It doesn't look like it's too, so and we don't want to push the head too far forward because that's just replicating at forward position. But if your head is falling back, if your neck is actually back bending here, then you are avoiding back bending the upper back. So, Susie, you probably would be, let me get you a cushion. So all of you actually look like with the block on the highest setting, like your head is being pushed forward. So try the lower setting plus a cushion. Now see if that feels better. And for you as well, you can probably actually go to the lower setting plus a cushion. Or maybe a cushion folded in half. Yeah, try that. There's a fine line between your head getting pushed too far forward and your head falling back. And once having a head being pushed forward, I think, is less problematic than feeling like your head is falling back. Does that feel good to everybody? Yeah, it looks good. So I think for you guys, that's the right setup. Did you want to try a cushion too? Yeah. Yeah. So what I've been doing here is setting up with the blocks of the same height, but putting a cushion on the block that the head goes on. So find another cushion. Something like that. So again, if you have any feeling that it might feel like my head is falling back, but I'm not sure, you just bring the fingers to the back of the skull, lift the head off the support, traction the back of the head gently away from the shoulder blades. Again, not so far that the back of the neck tightens up, gets hard, keep it soft, and then release the head back down. And notice how the stretch in the front of the chest has just increased a little bit. Surrender into the floor. Tune into your breath. Savor each breath. There's a large number of peer-reviewed studies now that show that if you want to really learn something and remember it, incorporate it, you want to take a rest for about 20 minutes after your learning bout, which shouldn't be longer than 90 minutes for optimal learning. And Shavasana does that for you in terms of learning new ways of moving, new biomechanics, better ways of moving, better posture. Your brain is actually very active here, strengthening synaptic connections that were weak, actually engaging in neuroplasticity. So if you are tempted to skip Shavasana, don't. There's a lot of important stuff going on that you aren't aware of. if at any point draping yourself over blocks just is getting a little uncomfortable, it doesn't allow you to fully relax anymore, feel free to adjust, or feel free to just put the props aside and transition to a just standard Shavasana. Especially if your hyperkyphosis is very mild. Because by spending too much time draped over blocks, you could actually create a posture that's problematic in the opposite direction from hyperkyphosis. And that's usually called military posture. And it's also not really beneficial. It's just problematic in new and different ways. If your mind wanders, bring it back to the breath. Savor each breath. Move your fingers, move your toes, take your time. Right? Rushing ahead is another way to reinforce neck tension. Slowing yourself down is another way to let it go. Roll over onto one side, stay there for a breath or two, then use your hands for support to come back to a seated pose. Choose to sit on a prop if that helps you lengthen the back of the neck through more neutral hip alignment. And just sitting on something higher doesn't necessarily align your hips better, but it does reduce the effort required to create that adjustment. So roll your hip crests forward to neutral. No farther than that, just to neutral. And feel the front of the chest and the back of the neck lengthen quite automatically. Inhale, breastbone floats up, collarbones broaden, arms rotate out, wings spread, back ribs expand sideways, arms float up almost without effort. Exhale your hands to your heart. Let's end with one Om. Take a slow, delicious inhale, first into the front, then into the back ribs. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering. Thank you for practicing with me. Have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, come talk to me or send me an email.